Tisha B'av is the saddest day of the Jewish year. And one of the traditions that we have on Tisha B'av is that we recite what is called Kinot. What are Kinot? Kinot are literally elegies or very sad poems. The original Kinah predates the destruction of the temple. We already have a Kinah of David at the death of Jonathan and King Saul. But the most famous Kinah is certainly the one that was authored by the prophet Jeremiah, and what is commonly known as the book of Eicha. This lamentation is recited every Tisha B'av in the evening. We sit on the floor, and in a very mournful tune, we recite the haunting words of Eicha Yashva Badad. How was it that the city that was so full of people and so full of visitors, so full of pilgrims, is now Yashva Badad, sits alone and weeping, for casting a solemn and forlorn figure? The words of Jeremiah have echoed through time, but there's a fascinating story in history to these elegies. Before the destruction of the temple, God appeared to Jeremiah and said to him, write down the following. He writes it down, and this is recorded in the book of Jeremiah. He sends it with Baruch, his scribe, to Jerusalem. There it is presented to the king. The king, in his anger, destroys the scroll and burns it in a fire, because the words are so traumatic that how could Jeremiah even suggest or have the audacity to claim that the temple of God will be destroyed? Have we not had other troubles? Have there not been centuries and bad kings and idolatry and all forms of worship, and the temple was never destroyed? God would never destroy his house. And the king Joachim tears up the scroll and throws it in the fire. God then says to Jeremiah, rewrite the scroll. The original scroll, according to the Midrash, was 3 chapters. Jeremiah added to the scroll post the destruction of the temple. And thus we have 5 chapters of the book of Eicha. And since that time, we have been adding to the Kinot, to these elegies, destruction of the second temple, the persecutions during the Dark Ages, the Crusades, the expulsion from Spain, the horrors of Khmelnytsky, and the unparalleled disaster called the Shoah, the Holocaust. All of these events we remember on Tisha B'av. The tradition of the day of Tisha B'av is that the entire morning is spent sitting on the floor recounting these Kinot. And the Kinot give us incredible sway of Jewish history. We start with the destruction of the temple. We move on then to the death of the great sages. We have a very powerful Kinah which speaks about the 10 martyrs, Rabbi Akiva and his fellow rabbis, who are martyred in the name of Judaism. There's a Kinah in which we describe the expulsion from the land. We cry out and we contrast between the excitement of going back, leaving Egypt to go to Jerusalem, and the exile which took us out of Jerusalem. We read about the burning of the Talmud in France. Each of these events are traumatic in its own right. And Judaism picks this day of Tisha B'av in which we are able to refer and reflect upon these stories. What books do I use for the Kinot? Well, the traditional one that we've been using has been this one, the Tisha B'av Compendium by Abraham Rosenfeld. It has a fantastic English translation and a basic commentary at the bottom. Because the words of the Kinot are hard, they're not the regular Hebrew, you may struggle to read them in the Hebrew, so a good translation is certainly worthwhile. The other one that I use is this one. This was produced in the last 10 years by the Orthodox Union, called the Luxstein edition. And this is based on the lectures of the late Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik would spend every single Tisha B'av in the morning going through each line by line of the Kinot. And these lectures were written down and have been produced into this wonderful volume. Between these two books, I have what to read. But for many people, they will spend their Tisha B'avs, in addition to reading the Kinot, to watching movies, and there are plenty now on YouTube or on Netflix, about either the destruction of the temple, stories of the Holocaust. The purpose of the day is to spend time reflecting upon what happened, the destruction and the causes of the destruction. Our rabbis tell us that if we have not seen the rebuilding of the temple in our generation, it means that the sin is still there. What is that sin? It is called sinat chinam, the hatred of another. So use this time to learn about what happened. Experience a Tisha B'av in your shul, and work upon the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'reacha. Learn to love another person.